Now there people are coming in. Yeah, perfect. Welcome. So we are still waiting.
I think we have 7 audience. Bernd.
Yeah, Thammarat?
Yes, we have, I think 7 or 10 audience already.
Okay, 9. That's fine. Thammarat, should we start?
Yes,
it's your turn,
yes,
please.
So, yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Good. So thank you very much and good morning, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, that to join this session that's about the SDG6 in the urban context, that we would like to discuss a bit on how we assess, analyze, and address the synergies and trade-offs between the SDG6 and other SDG through the innovative tools and methods. I think this session we will try to highlight and then try to give an answers to the questions that we try to think about, that the SDG6 affects the localization of other SDGs in the urban context, and then how can innovative tools and methods encourage the synergies between SDGs in the urban context. I think that's the very important part, which we can later discuss about the potential of the decentralized approach, participatory plannings, and natural-based solutions. So I think this session we have very interesting presentations from the oral presentations, 3 of them, and then another 2 poster presentations. That would be very interesting. So within an hour, I think we can have a presentation and also the Q&A parts that can highlight the issue of the SDG6 and the others. So thank you very much. And then Bernd will try introduce and moderate the session of the presentation and also the poster session. Thank you, Bernd.
Okay, thank you, Thammarat. Welcome everybody. Yeah, best greetings here from Berlin. Yeah, so and this is now Corona times. Yeah, everybody is sitting somewhere in the world. Somehow we are connected. Yeah, but I hope that next time, yeah, we can meet individually somewhere in the world. Yeah, and as well have apart from presentations and discussions. Yeah, somewhere a coffee together. So we have several presentations this morning or this afternoon, yeah, and we will start with Rachel Ko. Rachel will talk about towards climate resilient municipal water supply in Bangkok. It's a collaborative risk-informed analysis, yeah. And I just tell you some words about Rachel. Rachel, please correct me. Yeah, you are at the Singapore University of Technology and Design, and you have discovered your passion for passion. That's good. Yeah, for water engineering, while doing your undergrad degree in civil engineering at the Nanyang Technological University in Singapore. And this propelled you to study a master degree in water engineering and management at the Asian Institute of Technology, where you were involved in studies of climate change impacts on the municipal water supply system of Bangkok. Subsequently, you have worked as a research engineer at the National University of Singapore, focusing on water budget analysis in Illinois. And currently, you are pursuing your PhD at the Singapore University of Technology and Design. And now your research, it lies in the water energy nexus domain, where you attempt to understand the complex interactions between the water and energy system through modeling. So we are looking forward to a very interesting presentation. Rachel, please.
Yeah. Okay. Hi, thank you very much for the introduction. Okay, I shall share my screen.
I think I'd just like to bring a notice that we have 3 presentations and poster presentation, and then the oral presentation should take not more than 12 minutes. And then later, the poster presentation can present about 5 minutes. Otherwise, we will be not able to control the timing. So please start, Rachel.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Okay, so hi, Rachel. So I think the introduction was really clear. So currently, I'm a student at the Singapore University of Technology and Design. So this work that I'm presenting today is a collaboration between myself, Professor Babel, Dr. Victor, and Dr. Mendoza. So all the affiliations are here. So the topic for today would be towards climate resilient municipal water supply in Bangkok, a collaborative risk-informed analysis. So I'd like to make use of this title slide to actually motivate our work. So the 3 lines will actually show you exactly what we are doing. So towards climate resilient. So when we talk about climate resilience, we are suggesting some form of risk that we are subjected to. So in this case, it's climate change, and there's loads of uncertainty within this. So within this uncertainty, there's a combination of direct and indirect impacts of climate change and socio-economic shifts. Now, why do we say that there are 2 kinds of impacts? So when we think of climate, we think of meteorology, right? So for example, temperature, rainfall, humidity, and so on. But all this actually affect many of our actions. Like for example, if the temperature is really high, we have a higher demand for water, we drink more, we shower more, and this actually puts a pressure on the water system. So in terms of irrigation, maybe more water needs to be extracted to water the crops. Within the urban context, which is what we are focusing on today, like municipal water supply in Bangkok, we require a lot of water infrastructures, and all these require large investments. So this is in the range of millions or billions of dollars. Therefore, the decisions that are made need to be sustainable and relevant in the next at least 50 to 100 years. Now, so how do we ensure that? We use a collaborative risk-informed analysis. So the framework that we are applying, okay. So this is my second slide. Yeah, it's called Greta, Climate Risk Informed Decision Analysis. So Greta is basically a 5-step planning process, which begins with establishing the decision context, followed by a bottom-up vulnerability assessment, formulating robust and flexible actions, evaluating plan alternatives, and institutionalizing the decisions. So what we're focusing on is actually only the first 3 steps in our research for today. So the purpose of CREDA is that it's developed for robust water management, and it has stakeholders at the heart of the planning process, which means that there will be tailored decision-making under different sorts of uncertainty. So now I'd like to introduce my case study, which is the Municipal Water Supply of Bangkok, Thailand. So this is under the Metropolitan Waterworks Authority, MWA, because they're in charge of the service area to Bangkok. So yeah, if you can see the map over here, these are the different water treatment plants in Bangkok, and then this is the intake point. It's called Samle Raw Water Pumping Station, station number C55, which takes in water from the Chao Phraya River. So the Chao Phraya River basin is actually very complex because let's zoom out a little bit to this map over here. You can see that there's a very large network of river systems over here. So it originates with the Ping Wang Yom Nan River, and then it flows downstream into Chao Phraya, which means that this is a complex system with many water users and many upstream reservoirs, dams, and so on. So notably, there are 2 big dams, the Bumibol Dam over here and the Sirikit Dam. So these are multi-purpose dams that not only provide water for consumption, but also for other purposes such as hydropower generation. Also, there are smaller dams, regulatory dams, such as Chao Phraya Dam. Now, the station that we are focusing on is C55, which is our pumping station. Slightly upstream, we have C29, 30 kilometers away. So I'll tell you the significance of this in a while. And one important thing that we need to note is that our pumping station is only about 100 kilometers from the downstream Gulf of Thailand. Now, Gulf of Thailand is the inlet of the South China Sea. So we're talking about sea with saline water. So you can see that this system is also subjected to salinity from the downstream. So given the complexity of our study area, we're not able to use the traditional Greta framework, which is why we have decided to modify it a little bit, such that it suits the case study. So it'll begin the same way with establishing the decision context, whereby we have a few rounds of consultations with stakeholders to identify the different stresses, thresholds, and indicators of the systems. And instead of having a model of the system, we'll actually bypass this and go through, we'll continue by evaluating the historical records of the different stresses in terms of the critical threshold violations. And then we'll look at it in terms of the number of days per year that the thresholds are being violated. We'll then go through a series of stress tests by varying the historical data and combine the shifts to look at how badly the system fails. With that, we'll look at the plausibility of these conditions and formulate robust actions. So yeah, here are the results. So first of all, we went through a few rounds of interactions with the stakeholders, the MWA. So they identified 3 main points for us. So one important thing is that flow at C29. So C29 is this point here, upstream of C55. So if flow are less than 80 cubic meters per second, it actually indicates that there might not be sufficient water from upstream to dilute the salinity coming in from the Gulf of Thailand. So if this happens, it will prompt an action from the utility itself. So they will require the authorities from the upstream to release more water such that they can dilute the water for consumption, for intake. Yeah, so this one actually means that there's a potential for the system to fail. And then the actual things actually happen at the pumping station. So we are looking at water quality, salinity, and turbidity. Okay, so one point that we need to note is that for the water supply utility, their main concerns are actually either water quantity or water quality. Quantity in this case is not much of a problem for Bangkok because within Thailand, the allocation gives them the highest priority. Yep, so for municipal water supply, they will always receive water. So water quality is a big challenge. When the salinity is more than 0.25 grams per liter, there'll be a reduced plant operations. And then when it's more than 0.5, they will trigger the critical plant operation plans. In terms of turbidity, when it's above 200 NTU, they will require more chemicals. Therefore, there's an increase in cost and duration of water processing. Okay, so this is the time series of the historical data for the points. So the top panels are the river flows. For the bottom, this is salinity and this is turbidity. So it's pretty intuitive. Low river flows, high salinity, and high river flows, high turbidity. So one thing that we need to note here is that river flows are an indication of potential failures, and actual failures are actually measured at the intake point itself. So these are the scatter plots of the data. So how do we read these? Okay, so the x-axis for both, it's the flow at station C29. So the y-axis here is salinity, while this is turbidity. And this is the action matrix, which means that whenever the points fall, let's say in this quadrant, we do not need to take any actions. So it's good to know that 80% of the time, we do not need to take actions. But on the left of the matrix, so we see that it's when flows are low, right, decreasing flow, and salinity is high. So when it falls into the left, it means that the low flow rates are less likely to counter the high salinity from saltwater intrusion, whereas from the right, it means that even when there is high flow, there might still be potential of high salinity due to the high tides from the Gulf of Thailand. As for turbidity, we are concerned about the top right quadrant, whereby the turbidity is really high due to sediments from the upstream. So it's good to know that it only happens around 0.14% of the time. Now the stress test. Okay, so as mentioned, since we do not have a model, so we look into the historical data analysis instead. So we break them up into the different years. So in the year 2011, we have a lot of missing data. All right, so we look at the worst performance identified for each of the threshold. So for example, for salinity, in 2013, there's like 31 days that exceed this threshold defined of 0.25 grams per liter. And then we stress the system by varying the entire range of data until it exceeds the worst performance historically. So we either add them, like in terms of 10% increments, or we decrease them. So here's the result of the combination of the shifts. So how do we read this? Over here, it's the salinity. Okay, so x-axis for all, change in flow. Y-axis will be a number of failure days, which is the metrics that we're looking at right now. So when we vary the flow, so for example, given the current salinity, which is this black line over here, if the flow is increased by 50% to dilute the salinity, there will still be 35 days of failure. So this is how we look at the extent of failure. And then if, let's say, salinity in the future becomes really bad and it increases by 50%, even if we increase the flow correspondingly by 50%, there'll still be 100 days of failure. So this would help the utility to identify the different kinds of failures that the system is being subjected to. Now for turbidity, if the system, even when the turbidity comes down by 20% and the flow increases by 50%, there'll still be about 18 days of failure. So we can see that the more serious form of failure is actually for salinity. So to conclude, the Bangkok water supply is kind of at risk. This is a complex system and is highly dependent on the river flow available, salinity, and sediments. The combined effects of sea level rise and land subsidence is expected to increase the salinity, which cannot be reduced even with an increase in river flow of 50%. There are different adaptation solutions that the utility is currently exploring. So there's seawater desalination, shifting of raw water intake upstream, as well as interbasin transfer. So the interbasin transfer has already been happening between here, between Chao Phraya and the Mekong Basin. And also for turbidity, we suggest like enhanced soils conservation efforts in the upstream watersheds and also tighter policies and enforcement to prevent chemical discharges. So with that, I end my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. This was a very interesting presentation, yeah, and you're really on time, yeah. Since we have 2 minutes left, perhaps there is one question we could answer. Has anybody one question to ask, address? So you are surprised, I see. One question. If not, we go to the next presentation. Okay, Rachel, thank you very much. Yeah, and I'm looking forward to go to Bangkok again. Yeah, so yeah, and then we can look forward to the presentation of Juliana Markel from the Chemical Engineering University of Bath in United Kingdom, and Juliana. She is a civil engineer with a master in environment and natural, industrial, and urban risks. And Marcel, during your studies, you have worked on decentralized wastewater treatment systems, and you have later gained a range of experience in industry working on modeling of water supply network and micro drainage projects. You have joined the Water Informatics, Science and Engineering, WISE, and the Center of Doctoral Training. And you are currently in your second year of research at the University of Bath. And you are developing your project, which is entitled Improving Urban Water Security by Sectorization of the Urban Area and Decentralized of Water Infrastructure. Your research interest includes water and sanitation in developing countries, water management, and water security. Juliana, please show us your first results.
Yes, I'll share my screen. Can you see it?
Yes.
Yes. Thank you so much for the introduction. So, good morning to you all. So, as you said, I am a PhD student at the WSCC at the University of Bath in the UK. And I will present today, as part of my PhD project, my work on urban water security assessment at city and sector levels. This work is being developed under the supervision of Professor Jan Hoffman and Dr. Junji Shen from the University of Bath and Professor David Butler from the University of Exeter. So as you know, water security is a very broad concept that encompasses many aspects related to water, and it has different definitions and can be studied from different perspectives, approaches, and at different scales as well, ranging from individual, household to national or global scale. And assessing it is very important because it provides essential information and measures that can lead to actions to improve water security. So as the home of more than half of the population, with this number only to increase in the next decade, the urban area is something that presents very big challenges when we talk about water security, especially because we have so many different conditions in the urban area. As you can see in the picture, sometimes we can have really different neighborhoods living side by side. And what is done usually when considering assessing urban water security is to look at one score or average to the entire urban boundary. But which is very important because it gives a quick snapshot, a quick evaluation of the situation. But when we're talking about big cities, perhaps looking at just one score, one evaluation for the entire area, maybe we are overlooking some realities and some needs, specific needs of the neighborhoods in the city. And above all, we might be overlooking an opportunity to improve water security. So based on that and the idea of water security for whom, and also on the idea of the SDG6 of not leaving anyone behind, my work and the work that I will present today is inspired by a different perspective that could provide new information for decision makers. So as part of my PhD, we are investigating how downscaling urban water security assessment can provide more detailed information on local challenges and specific needs. And providing a spatial distribution of water security in the city can help improve water security and look where improvement is possible and what is needed to improve certain areas of the urban environment. And in my project in particular, we're going to look at how this information can help implement decentralized actions such as rainwater harvesting, sustainable urban drainage systems, and wastewater treatment systems at the neighborhood level. So in order to capture these multiple perspectives of urban water security, we based our framework at the definition by the UN, and we considered 4 dimensions inspired by the infographic that is in the slide. So we developed a framework based on indicators that were divided in 4 dimensions: drinking water and human well-being, ecosystems, water-related hazards and climate change, and economic activities and development. So a total of 48 indicators were put together, dividing into these 4 dimensions, and in a second level by categories. So if we look at the blue dimension, that is drinking water and well-being, we have several categories that are included in this dimension, such as water quantity and quality, but also accessibility to services, reliability of infrastructure, water reuse, and public health and well-being. So by aggregating these indicators first by category and later by dimension, we can generate a spatial visualization of the results, first by sectors, and then compare that to the evaluation on the traditional urban boundary. To illustrate the implementation of the framework, we are in the process of applying it to a case study in a city called Campinas in Brazil. This city is a very large city in Brazil and one of the richest cities in Brazil as well. although they are rich, they still face many challenges related to water security, such as they still have to establish sewage connection to all, and they have several problems related to flooding. But it was very important that the city had enough resources to monitor its infrastructure, because as you see, we have 48 indicators that we need to populate with data. So we needed not only at the city level, but also in terms of the sectors, at the level of the sectors. So if we take a look at one first result, an example of a first result that we got for one category, just accessibility to services. If we considered in this category 3 indicators: piped water coverage, sewage connection, and affordability. And we have really good scores for the city of Campinas for the 3 indicators, and the aggregation of this category also has a very good score for the city. However, if we take a look at how the scores are distributed when considering the sectors, we do see a range of scores going from 0.11 to 1 in the municipality. And if we only considered what the municipality defines as urban area, we still range from 0.17 to 1. We can see that variation, especially in the outskirts of the city. The city center is very green with really good scores, but if we take a look around, we see a higher variability of scores. So and even if we take into account that perhaps in the outskirts we don't have many people living in there, we still need to consider that no one should be left behind in terms of water security. And if you take a look at the bar graph that I put in the bottom of the slide, there are quite a few sectors that do have a lot of people living in them that do have a score really below the city score. So there is room for improvement for a lot of the population in Campinas as well, even if it's a rich city where the city scores are really good. And if we take a look to what that looks like, it's quite interesting as well, because we can see from the pictures on the top of the slide, we have 2 extremes. One very good score that if you look at the picture, you would probably think, well, they have a good score. And if you look to the right side, top right side, you would probably imagine that they have some problems with accessibility to services. And you would imagine that they have a low score. But if you look to the bottom pictures, on the left side, you have a neighborhood that started as an informal settlement and then developed into a big neighborhood very close to the city center that still faces a lot of problems related to infrastructure. And if you look to the right side bottom, you have a very nice neighborhood, residential neighborhood, but they have very similar scores when considering accessibility to services. So we cannot just by looking at a picture or looking at what it looks like, have an idea of what the communities are facing in terms of water security. The nice neighborhood, they still rely on individual solutions for wastewater because they don't have sewage connection. So it's interesting to see that we should look at the data, should look at other categories because water security encompasses a lot of aspects, and also to go beyond first impressions and preconceptions. And just to conclude now, this project aims to provide a very realistic but also very detailed vision of the city. And it is important to have that information because it can help guide infrastructure planning and contribute to build new arguments to implement local initiatives and new policies, and help develop and improve water security at the community and neighborhood level, which by consequence will lead to an improvement of water security in the entire urban boundary. So thank you so much, and if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Obrigada, Juliana. It was a pleasure listening to you. Yeah, and I appreciate very much. Yeah, that you really came to the point. 10 minutes. Yeah, so we wish you a good luck. Yeah, for your further studies. And I think because I see here quite a number of people in this virtual room, working on similar issues, and I think that they are to share your experiences and your results with others, it would be of profit and benefit of many people here. Okay, thank you. Now we have to go, or we have the pleasure to go to the next presentation. It's Simon Dekker from the Imperial College in London. He will talk about SDG-based integration scenarios of Mumbai's water energy nexus.
But I'm sorry, there's two questions addressed to Juliana.
Yeah.
Okay, so should we take it? Yeah, okay, if you agree. Time manage question to for Juliana later, Okay. Yeah. Okay, perhaps you can interchange your ideas later. Otherwise, we will have problems with our time management. Sorry for that. But now we are with Simon, and he will talk about SDG-based integration scenarios of Mumbai's water energy nexus, and his research is situated in the intersection of water, energy, and health. Of course, this is SDGs, so to have these more holistic views, And as a postdoc, you are currently studying how the risk of infections with water-related diseases, they are linked to hydrometeorological variables. Your doctoral studies at the Imperial College in London involve the dynamics of water nexus energy in London and Mumbai, huge cities, and previously you have worked at the International Institute of Applied Systems in Austria, where you are analyzing long-term energy systems changes from end-use perspective, and you still collaborate on energy demand research. You hold a master in electromedical engineering from Ghent University and a master in environmental management from the Yale University. Simon, please, it's your turn.
Thank you. Can you just give a nod if you can hear me okay? Great.
Yeah.
Thank you. I have some big shoes to fill with the previous two presentations, so I hope I won't disappoint. Good day, fellow speakers and members of the audience. As Professor Gutterer said, my name is Simon Dekker. I am currently a postdoctoral research associate at Imperial College, and it's an honor to present to you here today part of my PhD research on the dynamics of the urban water energy nexus. One of the case studies that I research, and the one I will present on today, is Mumbai, or Greater Mumbai more precisely. Mumbai is the capital of the Indian state of Maharashtra, situated on a peninsula that was reclaimed from the Arabian Sea. The graph here shows the two districts of Greater Mumbai and the locations of the major wastewater treatment plants. The population of Greater Mumbai was 12.5 million at the last census, with an estimated 42% of people living in slums. The population in and around Greater Mumbai is still expanding rapidly, with a building development faster than the growth of the water system. This has led to very complex problems regarding the water system, and this is illustrated by titles of studies on the topic. For example, Pi Politics, Contested Waters, Landscapes of Disaster, Water Wars in Mumbai, and Pressure in all caps. Through the water energy nexus, these problems are tied with the energy system as well, and they are obstacles on the way to meeting the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals. And this presentation is about how the SDGs could be met. Before moving on, I want to show you how I think about the urban water energy nexus in my research. For me, the water energy nexus is the set of interactions between water and energy systems that enable life in a city. Geographically, both systems cross over the city boundary highlighted here. They draw in resources from the city's hinterland and convert them into usable forms for the end users, who are the reason why the systems have been set up in the first place. Urban end use is comprised mainly of the domestic and residential sector, and in my analysis, I limit myself to that. End use is driven by a demand for services, not for resources per se, and this, in my opinion, is a fundamental reason of why data on end use consumption is scarce. We simply don't think about it. When we wash, when we cook, when we read by the light of a lamp, We are indifferent to the amount of water or energy that we consume. We only want to be clean, we have healthy and tasty food, and have light. At the same time, this formulation in terms of services allows me to treat water and energy consumption at the end use in a balanced way, in which the reciprocity of the interactions is recognized. In this diagram, I also show the supply component of the water and energy system, which I term upstream, and the wastewater processing component of the water system, which I term downstream. This diagram also shows the various interactions between both systems at different stages. For example, final energy for wastewater treatment, water for cooking, and cooling water for thermal electricity generation, which will largely occur outside of the city. End-use demand for resources changes in response to a number of factors that propagate and loop back through the water-energy nexus. This is represented in this simplified causal loop diagram that we see here. The detail is not important, but I want to highlight three particularities of Mumbai's nexus. The first is excess water storage. It is thought that the intermittent water supply leads users to, on average, store more water than they use to be on the safe side for possible contingencies. But then they replace it all with fresh water in the next supply period. This effect inflates water demand in response to intermittency. Wastewater treatment needs to be upgraded, as at the time of study, most of it was only at the primary level. This means that there was a significant pollution load when the water was discharged into the ocean. Also, it is thought that not all wastewater is captured by the system. And finally, a significant share of Mumbaikars live in slums. These must be upgraded and slum living conditions must be eliminated to achieve the SDGs. This diagram clearly shows the centrality of end use, and it is the most complex component in the actual system dynamics model that I built and that underlies the following analyses. This is a quick glimpse under the hood of the actual stock and flow model of end use. The detail, again, is not relevant here, but I will say that it captures service provision, resource demand, and efficiency. And one of these modules exists for each combination of service and resource. For achieving national level goals such as the SDGs and those of the Swachh Bharat or Clean India mission, two SDGs are of direct and primary relevance for Mumbai. This is SDG6 on clean water and sanitation and SDG 11, which states that slum conditions must be eliminated. However, in Mumbai, these are linked to a number of other SDGs related to energy, infrastructure, inequalities, climate action, as well as aquatic life. Because of the complexity of Mumbai's urban dynamics, I construct three plausible scenarios as possible future pathways and map their narrative onto model parameters. The first scenario is the classical business as usual scenario, in which current trends continue, but against the background of intense development. There is slow electricity for gas substitution, and the oil price increases at a moderate rate in response to climate policies. However, the water system is slow to move away from intermittent operation, and wastewater treatment levels increase only slowly. Decent housing is constructed as a way to upgrade slums, but at a slow rate. Then there is the SDG compliance scenario, in which all the changes occur faster to virtually achieve the SDGs as they apply to Mumbai by the year 2030. And finally, there is an in-between scenario where priority is given to improving the water system above anything else. The first result of the analysis is that the end-use interactions increase water use, and this goes for all the scenarios. So this graph here shows per capita energy consumption on top and water consumption below for the base year 2011 and for the three scenarios in 2030 and 2050. Both direct consumption and indirect consumption, such as cooling water for electricity generation, are represented. What's in purple is consumption that's linked across the resources. It shows a relative increase in water consumption on the bottom, indicating that total water consumption is driven by increases in energy use in the future. The second result is that the end use dominates the urban water energy nexus. This follows from the fact that of all of the interactions, those at the end use, here shown in purple, are greater than the small blocks at the top and bottom ends of the graph, which indicate indirect consumption. This finding is consistent with what has been found for cities elsewhere and confirms that end use merits more attention than upstream and downstream Nexus components in the context of a city. The graph here shows the need for infrastructure capacity expansion per decade. The colors indicate the different scenarios, with the red color showing business as usual. The first result here is that the business as usual trajectory will add challenges as it has the greatest infrastructure requirements in the future and therefore the greatest costs in almost all categories. A corollary of this is that continuous 24/7 water supply for everyone is possible and has multiple benefits. For example, the SDGs can simultaneously be met and costs can be saved on some infrastructure investments compared to business as usual.
Simon, just the last minute, please.
Yeah, this is my last slide. So putting all of this together provides a very high-level recipe of how Mumbai can meet its targets. First of all, slums must be upgraded so that every Mumbaiker has decent living conditions. All buildings need to be sewered and wastewater must undergo at least secondary treatment. These wastewater infrastructure investments are mitigated because water consumption is lower compared to business as usual. This is thanks to a return to continuous operation of water supply, which obviates the need for excess water storage. This return to continuous water supply is a central requirement for SDG achievement. Electricity must substitute for gas, as only electricity can be decarbonized, and this is something that would happen on a national level. And finally, it is important to mitigate end-use energy demand, which is projected to grow strongly, for example, through efficiency measures. I hope that you learned something new, and I look forward to your questions and to the discussion. I also invite you to take a look at the publication that came out of this research, and I will post a link to the paper in the chat as well.
Thank you very much, Simon. So now I see that you have already an exchange here of your questions and answers, respectively your ideas. Yeah, make intense use of the chat function, please. The next presentation, and it's a shorter presentation. Yeah, it's Greta. She will talk about polycentric and water-sensitive urban development, about a concept and potential transition pathways. Greta holds a master in natural resource management and has a background in biology. Greta, you are currently working as a research associate at the Institute for Technology and Resources Management in the tropics and subtropics at the Cologne University of Applied Science. And your work is related to the research project Poly-Urban Waters, and you are focusing on socio-ecological systems and nature-based approaches for sustainable urban change. Your research interest includes, but is not only limited to social ecological system research, interactive simulation models, and natural-based solution, environmental risk reduction, natural resource conflicts, and needs-based capacity building. Greta, please.
Hi, yeah, thank you for the introduction. I'm actually running into a trouble to share my screen.
We can see you.
You can
see it. Yeah, we can see it.
Screen? Yeah?
Yes.
Ah, okay. Let's see it from a different sharing option. All right. So then I will start. Well, the poster presentation, or the poster, was co-authored by Ian McNamara, Anja Wigfam, and Johanna Westermann, and we are part of the Poly-Urban Waters project team. And as a project, we are looking at sustainable urban development in cities in Southeast Asia. And we see that the global agendas have outlined visions of sustainable urban development, but their implementation still remains a challenge. And we see in Southeast Asia, especially this challenge arising in secondary and tertiary cities who are picking up the pace in urbanization, but struggle with lacking capacities and are overwhelming amount of water challenges in the implementation of the sustainability agendas. So what the project aims to do is to develop transferable tools and methods together with the cities that look at the interface of urban planning and integrated water resources management. our working hypothesis is that polycentric approaches to water-sensitive development can link this gap in needs and the capacities of the cities. Polycentric approach is a multi-layered concept that cuts across space and across sectors. And we are hoping that this will allow the cities to actually explore synergies and co-benefits between water and other critical local sustainability challenges. So how are we going to do that? We are working on a guided co-production process in 3 steps. First, we are looking at a baseline assessment where we ask ourselves with the cities together, what is water in the city? And what is the current status of these water resources? Then we are working towards a vision building process where we ask what do we want water to be in the city in 2030 and 2045? So how can the city look like? And last but not least, we are going towards a transition pathways where we look how realistically can we move from A to B, so where we are now to what we imagine in the future. And we are doing this, going through these 3 steps from different perspectives. So we are looking at it, of course, from an urban water resources perspective, so supply, demand, and quality. But we are looking also at socio-ecological systems, for example, in nature-based solutions applications. We are working with participatory methods, and we are working with governance models that lead towards a SDG-oriented planning. So for a closer look at the whole process, visit the poster and look at the graphic on the right that explains it in more detail. And concluding what we find so far. So we have done initial assessments in the project and worked with many local stakeholders. And we find that yes, there are lacking capacities and overwhelming challenges for realizing the SDGs in the cities. We find also that nature-based and hybrid approaches have a big potential. However, they need to be context relevant in their configuration to be able to make a real impact on the ground. And we find that inclusive formats that build up on co-production and participatory approaches are at the essence, because they are able to work cross-sectoral and actually include all the relevant stakeholders. So answering to the question in the title, we can say yes, from a conceptual perspective, polycentric water-sensitive urban development can support the localization of the SDGs in secondary and tertiary cities in Southeast Asia. But the question remains, how can this concept be integrated practically with local realities in a way where the benefits outweigh the trade-offs? And we are hoping to answer this question in the process of our project in the next 4 years. And we invite you all to visit our project website, polyurbanwaters.org, and please contact us with any questions or interest to cooperate. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Greta. Now we come to our last presentation, yeah, and it's Hendra Gupta from Bremen Overseas Research Development Association, BORDA, and here again, Asian Institute of Technology is one of the partners, and he will speak about aligning SDGs to city plans through water sanitation and sanitation interventions. Case studies from 6 East Asian cities. And just to introduce Hendra, he is an urban sanitation practitioner. Yeah, he works currently developing the knowledge hub at the Asian Institute of Technology. And it's a training center for integrated sanitation approach and bridging SDGs to local city plans. He has a background in English education and develops his interest in urban sanitation issues when he joined BORDA Indonesia in 2000. Hendra, you ventured into various sanitation projects such as community-based sanitation in Indonesia, dissemination of decentralized wastewater treatment systems in the Philippines, reconstruction project in the tsunami-affected area, and national urban sanitation development program in Indonesia. You are currently working and managing a collaboration between BORDA, Southeast Asia, and Asian Institute of Technology, the Regenerative Sanitation Hub. Sandra, you as practitioner, you certainly can contribute valuable and insights how to bring things on Earth. Please.
Thank you, Bernd, for the introduction. I will share the presentation. Yes, this is actually one of the results from our works with the Asian Institute of Technology in the context of the Knowledge Hub to visualize SDG interlinkages within city development context. This is a lesson learned from several cities, partner of BORDA in Laos, Cambodia, Indonesia, Philippines, and Vietnam. Yes, the visualization of SDG interlinkages within the city development context was intended to exercise the alignment of targets of SDG6 on water and sanitation, and 11 on sustainable cities, and the new urban agenda to cities urban development plan. I think one of the challenges working with the cities is that not only the cities, but also the provincial government and the national governments, we all know that they work in silo, they have their own plan, they have reference, a national reference guidance for planning, but in reality, when it comes to project implementation, they work in silos. So they only care about what their plans and also the implementation of their plans. And the second intention is to identify whether urban water and sanitation theme address the relevant SDGs targets at the city level. And then, of course, recommend approaches and action to cities' decision makers. How did we do that? We did a horizon scan, but this one is a quick scan considering the time that we have with the local government. So it's a horizon quick scan, and through desk research, like reviewing the local planning documents, also reviewing the sustainable development goals and also new urban agenda. And then we use worksheets, very simple worksheets from matrix. So the local governments come into the workshop and they have their plans, 10 years, 15 years plans. And then we come with a worksheet and we jointly identify relevant issues, target and indicators, as well as identify current and projected challenges, as well as to identify the gaps. And then the worksheet also guide the participants to address the identified gaps and find out the trade-offs and also synergies after looking at the city development plan and also SDGs and also the new urban agenda. So in the end, we came up with we mapped out a list of goals and activities that contribute to the achievement of other goals, as well as greater environmental or economical impact, perhaps. And then also the main intention is also to provide timely awareness of what is new or changing when one water and sanitation project is implemented, what is actually changing on the other spectrum, on the other side of the development area. So at this horizon quick scan, we also identify risks as well as opportunities, which hopefully the exercise will transform impact on the city as well as the way the government works. These are the flow of the process. It's a one-day process. Therefore, I say it's a quick scan. It's not a really horizon scan, which involves a lot of data collection and analysis. So in the end, we look at one example from Krong Kache in Cambodia. This is the provincial capital of Krache province, situated along the Mekong rivers in western Cambodia. They have 5 urban districts. This is home to, Krache is home to around 33,000 inhabitants. And they really want to explore or expand more on their tourism capacity because they're known for the famous river dolphins, also some ancient pagodas and its French colonial architecture. So focusing on work on the SDG 6 and 11, you see the, after looking at the plans and also the SDG and the new urban agenda, we came up to create this kind of, this circle. The blue circle illustrates interlinkages of SDG result indicators for Krongkatje, specific for Krongkatje. And then the center of the circle illustrates the priorities and the aim results. So therefore, SDG6 and 11 mostly sitting at the center circle. And then the circular layer surrounded exemplifies leverage of multiple results for achieving prioritized results. So we're doing it based on looking at the activities, the planned activities of local governments, and then try to link it with SDGs and also look at the area, what other goals are actually connected or contributed to achieve to other goals. And on the right side, this is the execution boxes. The execution boxes demonstrate the city government's intervention to achieve the aim result within 2019 to 2030. The results dynamic and execution boxes are strategic reference for annual city planning as well as for budgeting. So for this case, like in Krongkatje, for example, the center goal 6.3 on improved water quality, they intend to apply decentralized wastewater treatment as well as establish a fecal sludge management, which actually they contribute to the reduction of the adverse per capita environmental impact, which is goals number 11.6, which also then on the outer layer, on the third layer, which is goals 3.9, to reduce number of deaths and illness from air, water, and soil pollution and contamination, as well as reducing waste generation, goal 12.5, and in the end, goal 14.1, prevent and reduce marine pollution, as well as to restore degraded land and soil. So based on...
Please, 1 minute, please.
Yes, Bernd. So by doing these activities, they actually can achieve many relevant goals of the SDGs. That's what we would like to show to the government, but you have to know how to monitor that. My last slide is visualizing of the SDG interlinkages actually help city planners and decision makers to zoom out and reflect trade-offs and synergies within their urban development activities. The whole process benefited the cities in a way that their plans are systematically excellent and related, as well as capitalize on existing political will and initiatives that give momentum to activities. And the result will provide a common language for strategy building, helping to structure coherent discussion within the city government itself to meet the Agenda 2030 goals. The process has a limitation. Only one government representative actually attended of 6 or 7 cities, but we hope to bring this forward into the city itself in the future. Thank you very much, Ben.
Thank you, Hendra. Now I hand over to Professor Thammarat. Please, Thammarat, it's your turn.
Okay, thank you very much, Bernd, and also thanks a lot for the presentation by the 5 presenters, starting from Rachel, Juliana, Simon, Greta, and Hendra. So I think I'd like to summarize in a way that we have learned many of the case studies from the big cities like Bangkok, Mumbai, together with that, the Campinas. And also we have the very good case studies or the research to be conducted in Southeast Asia, the small city in the least developed country as well. So that I think that would be the very good lesson learned and key takeaways for us, that if we try to focus on one SDG, it may not be possible at all to achieve one of them if we are not thinking about that the other SDG that's interlinked together. So our experience in visualizing this kind of SDG at the city, at the small city levels, it is quite difficult to translate them and then make them visualize how they can strategize their plans, their regulations. And of course, I think I like this kind of a platform to discuss, not just through the presentation, but on the chat box. I noticed that there are kind of a Q&A on that already that make our chairmanships would be much easier to moderate. So I'd like to conclude this session to say that the SDG6 in the urban context, we need more integrative approach to plan, to implement, and also to consult with the people. So depending on the complexity at the level of the cities, that in Mumbai, for sure, it would be much more complex than in the city in Cambodia. That the degree of complexity that also need to be taken into account, and also that the degree of development in Brazil, in Mumbai, in Bangkok, it is very fast growing cities, and also the country GDP growing so fast. Compared with that, the city in the Laos, in Cambodia, it would be much slower. So that would be the things that we need to think carefully, that how we can address this issue in a way that we can address the border security, and together with that, the climate change to come. So I just like to conclude with that, Bernd. Thank you very much.
So thank you, everybody. Yeah, I hope you have got some insights, but I think I have seen that you are already exchanging your emails, yeah, and results and current processes are available at different websites, yeah. I wish you a nice day and further good continuation of the conference. Good luck to everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.